So, okay, we're all together. It was very interesting though. I'm actually really glad I was in there. Are people coming back now, Gary?
They are.
I have 12 minutes and 34 seconds.
They have 13 seconds to get back here. So they're going to get kicked back in whether they like it or not. All right, Kari.
Okay, so I think everyone's coming back to our large group, and here in just a minute, Gary is going to make a poll visible to you, and we would just ask that the reporter from each group go ahead and enter the score for each criterion in that poll. And if you weren't able to get through everything, that's okay. Really, just the purpose of this whole exercise is to see where you're having trouble, where you have questions, so that we can discuss. So after we do the poll, we'll have some time to walk through the evaluations, and please don't hesitate to ask questions.
All right. The poll is now open, so go ahead and
is this for everyone or for the groups?
hold on a second. Let me see. This thing is acting squirrely. Hold on. It's only giving me like 5 seconds for people to answer.
Gary, some of us only got through one criteria. That's
I
maybe
know,
our
and
quick submissions.
yeah, there you go. It's open longer now. I'm not sure why it closed so quickly.
So it would just be one person from each group putting the
Ideally,
information in.
yes.
What if we did not discuss that?
Then you can just bypass the question.
I think the question is, what if you didn't assign someone in your group to submit it?
That was my question. Thank you, Catherine.
You can fill it out. It's kind of fun to see.
Fill it out.
Yeah.
There's no reason everybody can't fill it out.
Yeah, I mean,
fill
if
it out.
everybody wants to fill it out themselves, they can.
Absolutely.
All right, is everybody about done? Cool. I'm going to close the poll. Well, maybe not. All right, Kari.
Yes. Were you able to close the poll?
There, I've got it closed now.
Okay.
So there's an important question. Is accept with revisions often an option for reviewers of educational research? For NIH funding, there's only funded or no funding. And yes, there is often accept with revisions.
Only NIH worked that way too and didn't have to go through a whole nother cycle.
Right. we're much more lenient, and we want people to learn and teach them how to really do it well. So we give feedback.
So I think we could walk through each of these and discuss and address your questions. So I think, Janet, you were going to go through purpose and research questions.
Yeah. So if we look at the purpose and research questions, I would say in looking at it, 59% felt pretty neutral about it, and only 28% felt that it was more on the significant side. So again, this is not that clear. So let's really look. What is the research question? Let's really look at what is the research question. Who wants to start the discussion on this?
And please feel free to just unmute yourself and start talking.
Yeah.
I'll say we can go to the text itself. In the second paragraph, sort of, we propose a project to develop an instrument to measure students' perspectives. That would be fine, but then the aims don't quite match. I don't know, they go beyond that. And aim 1 is really the statement of consistent with the developing the instrument. And then they use the instrument, but that goes outside the scope of developing the instrument, would be my claim. They need to validate it first.
Okay.
So this is one thing. Another important thing, that there are assumptions that are being made without solid evidence, without providing solid evidence. So when they say that this student's story, they carry the assumption, they jump to the assumption that there is mismatch between the student transmission perspective and the teacher perspective. They are focusing only on the idea of the perspectives, although this is multifactorial and there is no data provided about the quality of the class, how it is taught, and so on. I also have some concerns about the ideas that we are to see what's the perspective of the student, and then we focus on this. As medical educationalists, we plan interventions, and planning interventions means that we will need to have some sort of change management strategies so that we can accommodate the different students, and sometimes we would influence their perspectives to teaching and learning and so on. And so this is one thing. The other thing is that they are mentioning that there is little work to understand student perspective and their perspectives and their impact on evaluation and teachers and courses and so on. Again, there is a complete focus on one aspect of a multifactorial problem. The other things that here there is a mentioning of modifying a valid and widely used instrument to capture students' perspectives of good teaching. And the hypothesis is very much related to how much this is similar to the original TPI in terms of the factor structure. I don't know if this is the time to discuss this, or we might be talking about it in the methodology.
Well, let me just do a summary, because what I'm hearing, and I think there's some really good comments also in the chat, that the research question does not seem to really be clear according to the aim. Greg, you started off with that as a comment, and how you followed up with that. So, for example, it's modifying a valid and used instrument, the TPI, captures student perspectives, right? The current TPI captures teaching perspectives. So again, it's to create this new validated form, but Greg is saying, well, you really have to measure the form. So what I'm hearing as a summary, and then we can move on to the next part of it, right now, we don't have a really strong, solid base of the question matching the aims, is what I'm hearing. And we'd probably want to review it and work with the team. Any other, and then we'll, Kari, we would move on to the second group. Any other comments you'd like?
I can mention very quickly is that there was student evaluations aren't really quantitative, they're a bit biased. And if you look at reference number 4, in the grant, which they kind of misquoted. It basically said that student evaluations are flawed and don't really capture the professor's, the lecturer's ability to improve. And our group had said that there's good teaching, there's effective teaching, and then there's student preferred teaching. And this grant is only looking at the student's preference, and that might not be the best teaching method. So that was Tanya and Karen of our group that had brought that point up.
Ian, thank you very much. I think that capturing the word perspectives, matching a teaching perspective with a student perspective is what we're seeing as potentially outlined here, rather than thinking, is it good and effective teaching? They're different words. So I really appreciate, Ian, you picking that up. I
wouldn't mind building on that if I might.
Yes, please.
There's no addressing of, this is something that I noticed, and one of the fundamental flaws in their assumption is that teachers won't teach to the students' preferences and predispositions. If we learn what students want, there is always going to be that temptation to teach the way that they expect to be taught, even if that may not be the best way to teach them, just for the sake of getting a better student rating of instruction, because, you know, everybody's on the 10-year clock or whatever it is. There's no addressing of that whatsoever. That's concerning to me.
Nathan, you're really raising an important point about what is driving us as faculty, and what are the external factors with appointment and promotion, and do student evaluations count in our portfolios? So thank you for raising that.
The group I was in, it kind of relates also to that. We had a discussion about purpose and scholarly or a significance or scientific significance, and the frame of was the purpose to look at, it was the impact and the purpose to look at how faculty evaluations, how students' evaluations of faculty can impact curricular innovation. It's in that paragraph about impact. And we kind of toggled back and forth between the scholarly significance and that impact paragraph, and really about the research question, right? Because it's related to what impact it's going to have. And whether, again, it's kind of along the lines of, did it affect faculty's promotion or teaching portfolios, or the risk a faculty member will take to innovate if the student's perspective is going to impact their evaluations, et cetera. So kind of we saw how the first one and the last criteria of significance kind of overlapped each other in purpose. And that's, our group spent some time talking about that. Was that clear?
Thanks,
Yeah,
Giulia.
I agree with you. And it looks like what you just said, those are the background for this study, kind of. But in terms of the purpose or research question, I feel this is more of a skill instrument development and validation. Try to kind of transfer the TPI to student evaluation of teaching. So if they can be more focused and differentiate the background of this kind of a study with the research question, make the research question more focused, that will be a much stronger proposal. Thank you.
So let me throw it out. That's a very good point. So what would the research question be? What would a good research question? I think with any of our educational grants, we have to really focus and say, spend time, really get a strong question.
Yeah, I think it should be more specific. So here, this question is very kind of confounding.
Thank you. I think there was another.
So I was going to pipe up and say, hi, my name is Nina. I was in group 3, and group 3, you know, mostly gave scores of 3 and 4 for the 4 domains. And since we have very little time left, this clearly is a grant that did get funded, because Paul mentioned that the budget was around $6K, and it looks like the grant did get funded. And therefore, there must have been some merit to it, because the significance and the importance of what they're trying to address, that I would think the research question that they're trying to address, if I had to re-say it or rephrase it, is how do you quantify or how do you standardize or get any meaning out of student evaluations regarding teaching effectiveness? And it's an extremely difficult thing to normalize or standardize, just because of the, as it points out, the gap between what students expect and what really constitutes effective teaching. So the research question would be, how do you create a model to validate or to quantify or to normalize or standardize student comments and evaluations regarding effective teaching? So it looks like it got funded. Is that correct? Am I correct in assuming that?
It is. And in light of the time, I think I would actually like to, your points are so important about it. But Paul, I might ask you to have a few reflections here.
Excuse me, before we proceed for this, because there are very important comments relevant to the background and the theory behind this. They have focused mainly on the perspective theory, and I see that this theory itself needs review in view of the more recent educational theories that we are currently using. So if we're using mastery learning, and if we're progressing from the know to the know-how to show and then to the do, it doesn't make a lot of correspondence to be talking about silos like transmission alone, apprenticeship alone, nurturing, and so on, especially that each of these perspectives are suitable for a different domain of learning. So for instance, transmission might be suitable for knowledge more, apprenticeship is for skills, and so on. So I don't see that in the methodology, they have made that type of correlation between the theory they are using and the more recent theory that we are currently working towards, like entrustment, like the mastery learning, and so on. The other thing is that in the methodology, they have worked only on the modification of the instructions. And at the same time, the list of wording that is mentioned carries phrases or sentences, phrases which are not of equal or similar meaning. So helping to know or to learn difficult material is not the same like help me learn, is not the same that like influenced my practice of medicine or inspired me. So these phrases are totally different and they are corresponding to different meanings and different reflections. The other thing, they didn't mention what's the basis of the number 25 when it came to teachers and what are the specialities of their teachers, level of experience. A lot of confounding variables are being neglected. Also, predictive validity of good teaching. This is a predictive validity of good teaching? If you want to have a predictive validity of good teaching, then you need to get into the class, for instance, do the peer reviewing or have some sort of gold standard. You are just, we're doing research, for instance, on the degree of autonomy when it comes to operative skills assessment, in training and assessment. And we usually find a lot of discrepancy between how the teacher are describing the level of autonomy they are given and the actual. So,
so Nahal, you're really raising some important points, and it builds on what Catherine wrote in the chat. I want to read Catherine's note to everybody. If there was a way to measure the student perspective and it differs from the method being used to teach the course, then the faculty need to educate the students to appreciate the chosen method. So I think what I'm hearing as a group, that the teaching faculty's perspective and the chosen method should meet what the student is expecting. And what you're raising, Nahal, that yes, there are so many different perspectives depending on your format. So I really appreciate that comment to Catherine, and how we're doing that then becomes important. It might be a great research study. Should I pass it, Kari? I'm going to pass it back to you, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you for all the perspectives, and I think this just helps us all feel reminded how subjective and how everybody's opinions can vary so much, right, on these proposals. So let's quickly move on here so we can get through more of the proposal. Gary, did you want to talk about the perspectives or theoretical frameworks? Do we have time to talk about that?
Well, since we're running 7 minutes out, I think we should kick the can down the road and let Paul offer some insights.
Sounds good.
And before do that, I want to go to a question that are in the chat about, tips for writing grant proposals. We did send you 2 articles that fully elaborate on tips for writing grant proposal, and they also include how to approach the budget development. So you have the readings, and if you have any questions about the readings, you have the name of the authors. You're very welcome to, contact, in that case, us again.
Thanks, Maria. Paul, do you want to go ahead and chime in?
So, I wrote this grant with a team of folks. It was funded. I am really glad y'all were not the review panel.
We should have known that you are attending.
No, this is really good to do it this way.
Here's the deal. So I'm seeing. So I want to shift us off onto whether we believe this or whether this is good or not, and shift us on to the writing. So this was funded, and what was it about this that got us funded? And I'll start by answering a few of the questions in the chat box. One was, how do you deal with the limited amount of space? And I agree, this was a really tricky grant to write, because we're trying to give the big picture, the idea that student perspectives might influence the way they do evaluations. But this project is not about that. You can't even do that project until you work out the measurements of the student perspectives. And this project was about that. So in that limited space, we're trying to sell the big future idea, but also sell the first step, which is to make the measurement. And that first paragraph that starts the grant was strategically designed to give a little narrative that will hook the reviewers into the big idea, and then get in to try to sell the idea of this project, which was to make the measurement. And so with that, I'm going to step back and say, questions about what were you thinking? Why did you write it that way? What led you to do that in the writing? I'll entertain any of that and try to remember what we were thinking. Oh my God, did I stun you into silence?
We're still in the astonishment of your being here listening all our critique.
I think it's the best way. It's the best way to do it.
I can handle it.
We should have used a little softer tone than this.
No, it was really good. So the question, Paul, why was there no explicit research question included?
Great. That's a great question. Normally there would be, and normally you'd be very clear. The research question really here is, can we, in a valid way, measure students' perspectives of what is and what is not good teaching? And that was sort of implied. I love this conversation, because as we're having it, I'm thinking, geez, why didn't I actually articulate the research question? What I articulated was the project. We propose a project to make this measurement. With an implied research question, and then getting into the specific aims. There was also a question about what happens if specific aim 1 fails. Specific aims 2 and 3 are dead in the water, which normally I would say, yes, you got to write the specific aims so that they build on each other, but also that they're independent of one another. We rolled the dice on that one. We said, well, this could kill it, but we can't think of anything else to do, and we need something more substantive than just, we're going to factor analyze the instrument, because that's just not exciting and not going to grab the reviewers.
Paul, Kathleen asked, why did you choose to include information about social media presence in the last part.
So the last part, so the sections in this grant, this was for the Northeast Group on Educational Affairs of the AAMC. And the sections on this grant are exactly the section headers that were in the request for proposal. So, you know, you sort of take the usual thinking of background methods, and you sort of work it to what they want the sections. There often in most grants is a section on dissemination. And so what we did in that last section, that whole business of us saying what our titles were, saying that we're the past president of this and that and the other thing, is showing that we have a platform and we're going to use those platforms to disseminate the results of this proposal. So the idea is demonstrate that you have access to a large swath of people that you are going to share the results with, so that this research is highly cited. And won't that reflect well on the Group on Educational Affairs for the AAMC? The funders are interested in funding research that makes a big splash, because the funders can then say, oh, look, we funded this. And so we're showing them we can make a splash.
And I'm going to interrupt now because we are right at 1 o'clock, and out of respect for everybody's time, we have to bring this to a close. We have recorded this last half hour because that was the meat of the actual workshop. And the goal of this, honestly, it ties in with what we did on the MedEd chat last night, which was talk about how being a peer reviewer can actually help enhance your own writing skills. So having time to be able to critique a grant actually can help you as you work through writing your own grants down the road. I am going to be emailing all of you an evaluation form, and the recording is going to be put up on our YouTube channel that we have, and I'll email that link once I have that up and running as well. So we really do appreciate you guys taking the time to participate in this. And
can I ask a quick question, Gary, for Paul? Did you
Yep.
publish this? Because the chat, Gary might be able to include do you have publications that that Gary could include and then when he sends out the evaluation?
Nope, it's just in process for data collection. I put that in the chat.
Yeah, the project, so we got funded. The timeline's been thrown off a little bit by COVID, but we're just finishing up in the next month or so, the students filling out their portion of the survey. So that's where we are in the project.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining in.
Thank you very much.
Remember the next course, level 200, please.
There's your challenge, Janet.
Gary, you're gonna do like a little social media thing for Sdrme?
I've already put one up there, and I tried to make sure that I didn't have a bad picture of you. So
Can I tell you something with my last group? I was in the small group, and the last thing I said before my network went down was, I'll report back. Don't worry, I'll take that on. No joke. I am not kidding you. My final quote, and then my network goes down. I cannot even get, I can't get on anything.
Oh,
so
You
I
can
feel
stop
so
the recording,
bad.
Gary.
I feel so bad. I like